Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Tripping on Legends. We are dealing with episode 74. If you're looking for episode 73, you're in the wrong place. That was last week's episode, which I'm still having some technical difficulties getting up on the podcast. I want to welcome our listeners from midnight.fm, where it is always midnight. It is 9 o'clock here in lovely Florida. We escaped hurricane, so I guess that's pretty lovely. So we can kind of, give congratulations to that. I'm not quite sure what else we've got going on here in Florida that's to smile about. Tripping on Legends, I am Christopher Balzano. Please make sure that you are following us. Right now, we are on Facebook Live, and our Facebook Live is at www.facebook.com/Tripping on Legends. You can also listen to us. We are on IGTV right now. Hello, my IGTV people who I never get to give them the attention they deserve during the show because I've got this small little screen that I'm unable to interact with for those guys. But I do appreciate people who are following me on Instagram at Spooky Tripping. SpookyTripping@gmail.com is also the best way to get in touch with me. And of course, if you are still one of those people using Twitter, I'm using Twitter less and less in terms of finding things from other people, but not necessarily in terms of posting things. The posting for the Twitter account is at Spooky Balzano. Tonight, I'm doing something a little bit different. Not too different. I mean, it's not like revolutionary. It's not groundbreaking. It's definitely one of those hashtag follow the moment, follow the signs kind of moments. If you want to chime in about tonight's topic or just talk about anything paranormal, the number is 813-418-6822. And if you're listening to this on podcast, of course, subscribe to Tripping on Legends podcast, anywhere you get your podcasts. If you are listening to this via podcast, that same number is open all the time. So if you can't get in touch with me on Twitter, and you can't get in touch with me on Instagram, and you can't get in touch with me on Facebook, and you can't, always feel free to call. I'm always here for you. I am here for you. I called tonight's episode They Come Closer and Closer because I wanted to talk to people tonight about a phenomenon, about the concept, the idea that folklore and ghostly legends are continuing to evolve, whether we think they're not. And if we don't like the way that they are, that's on us, because the times they are changing, and it was a perfect convergence of those ideas, of those things, this week. And so it was like, wow, this is a really good opportunity to do this show, which was somewhat spontaneous in its subject matter, only because those things, which is what they do when you are following signs, they all seem to fall in line. I guess in a way, it all started about almost 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago. I was on Spooky South Coast, and the subject of how urban legends are spread and how they kind of evolve and how they kind of change in a modern time came up. And we talked about it a little bit. And then I was on David Scott's show, Spaced Out Radio, last week. Long show. I was on there for 3 hours, 2.5 hours of which was me actually talking. And he asked a similar question, which was, how are people getting their urban legends now? And it ended up being this discussion on, because he was asking, is the modern way that kids, and by kids, we could really open that up to tween, right, which was my focus for a while, and continues to be my focus with my daughter, to, I would say, young adult, and now beyond. This idea that are they moving the needle? You know, what is the impact of new media, if you will, on paranormal stories, and why are it was almost opened up as, are kids even scared these days? Like, do kids get scared? Do kids have are they scared by movies? Are they scared by stories that they hear? And I was like, yeah, they are. And as I was doing that, Ella and I, and if you're new to the show and you don't know who Ella is my 11-year-old daughter who is oft my co-host on the show, especially when it's something that pertains to, thanks, Jim. When it's something that pertains, that's Jim in the my old, who I was just talking about, like probably about 2 hours ago. If you're not on the Facebook, then you can't participate in the live chat. So you definitely want to do that. Thank you for distracting me, Jim. She consumes ghost stories differently than I consume ghost stories. She understands them differently. They evolve differently for her. And we had gotten a new camera, not own. It's something that I'm doing for school. So I have the camera, I've got a new digital recorder, I've got the sound equipment for something, and we were experimenting with it, basically trying to get it to work. And of course, the first thing Ella wants to do is make a horror movie. And she wants to make a horror movie with her and her friends. And I'm like, I highly encourage you to do that, because, you know, that's groovy. It's also cheap and easy to make a really good horror movie if you have just a little bit of equipment, if you're inventive. So we went online and we were looking at some of the winners. So these are people who won awards for best horror short story, like best horror short film, I should say. And we watched probably about, and it's funny because some of them really freaked her out, which was crazy because Ella's not scared by a lot, but she actually's like, I need to go watch Legends of Korra for a little bit just to like cleanse the palate, because this ghost stuff is just freaking me out. These horror things are too scary for me. But there was definitely a running theme through all of these. And when all these things kind of converged, I'm like, this is a perfect topic for Tripping on Legends. And then, lastly, on Sunday late, someone called to email me, or someone emailed me about a follow-up to a legend that I had been tracking for a while, a legend that I had been, I've published about, which I'll get into, which of course has to do with the Ocala Forest, so it fit in with that because knew I was doing that research. And I was like, this legend has changed. The actual, the way that this legend is being told is now different. And I think it has a lot to do with essentially this change in the way that people are learning their urban legends, the way that people are hearing their ghost stories. And of course, if you've experienced any of this, 813-418-6822, I've got it all hooked up. We had an amazing call last week that actually made it so that we didn't get to everything that we wanted to talk to last week, but that's what the beauty of the show is, right? So for those of you guys who don't know me, I was a paranormal investigator, for years, I would say, decade and a half at least. And I left. I got out of the biz. And there was one story that got me back into doing this, and that was the story of Slender Man. I have been obsessed with that case. If you follow any of my social media, anything that involves Slender Man, chances are I'm going to retweet it or I'm going to put it up there. I was obsessed with the case in the idea that Slender Man is real, which I firmly believe he is. But more importantly, the way that Slender Man was born, created, communally shared, and then thrown out into the world and then returned, right? So it was returned back to us violently, right? If you're talking about the case in Wisconsin, but even just the obsession with it, the movies that are now out about it, the multiple uh, uh, um, creepypasta and social posts that have been developed around it, like it has its own mythology, it has its own life outside of the original creation of it. And I think we talked about this last week, and I'm a very firm believer in that Slender Man as a paranormal figure is 100% real. I think it taps into ideas that have been manifesting themselves for generations, if not centuries. That the creepypasta version of Slender Man, the way that he looks and the way that he acts, is not. It's not new. It's not new. It's just the way that he physically looks there, and the marketing of him now is new, but he ain't new. So why? Why did he become so popular? Other than the fact that it's his creation on creepypasta is a representation of just how common he is, right? Um, I'm not quite sure, Troy, what Willow's Weep is. So you're gonna have to give me a little bit more. If you're talking about like Wisp of the Will or Will the Wisp, I can talk about that, but I'm not quite sure about the other part of it. Exactly what you're talking about. If you can type it out for me. But we were watching these movies, and they all had a very similar motif to them. And I understand why. A few months ago, and I spent all of today, I was working diligently, sitting in my classroom. But in my off time, I was researching this movie that I saw, and I can't remember the name of the movie. So if anyone knows the name of this movie, please share it with me. But the essence of the movie, and it essentially was a kind of a variation of the found format, which I'm a huge fan of. The found format film, which is these people were documenting an urban legend, and you have to stare off into this bridge, like the distance of this bridge. So it had all these real great urban legend elements to it. You stare off into the bridge for an hour without blinking, right? And their theory was the camera doesn't blink, so if we film it, then that'll be the unblinking eye. And after the end of the hour, you will see this figure. But then the twist, not really a twist, it was kind of predictable, but every time that the person shut off the camera, which would be the equivalent of blinking, right? The monster would come closer. The demon would come closer. And by the time they figured it out, the demon was pretty close. And they all went insane, and the demon killed them. Spoilers, and blah, 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 blah. You can see the movie for yourself if I can ever figure out what the name of the movie is. But it was the idea of the getting closer. And I get why it's a thing. This is all over. If you haven't watched like modern horror, or watched these stories, or read these stories like on creepypasta, it's a very popular theme now, and that is when you close your eyes, when you look away, when you turn off the lights, the figure, the monster, the ghost, the demon, whatever it is that are in these, get a little bit closer to you. And then it becomes a matter of you need to keep your eyes open to fight it. And of course, you ultimately can't, and then you die. And I'm not even kidding that we picked randomly like 7 of these movies, and 5 of them had that theme, all different variations of it, and they were all really well done. Like they were freaky and scary. But it's connected to part of the reason why Slender Man became so popular, and part of the reason why there's a very specific evolution of urban legends, modern urban legends. There ain't no campfire, right? Natalie and I did a really good show about the destruction of campfires, and like people don't hang around with their cousins anymore, and they don't go on camping trips. And these used to be traditional ways that the word of mouth, that urban legends and ghost stories were passed down. And it wasn't just kids. Adults would do the same thing. You would tell the ghost story when when there was a lull in something. And of course, it dates even further back. All history initially is this word of mouth that gets changed and variations in it, as well as your importance, right? So you put yourself into the story. Maybe it happened to your cousin, not because you're lying, but because you want people to really genuinely feel what you're saying. And so, you add yourself to it, or you heard it and you want people to really understand it. So it didn't happen in Tuscaloosa. It happened, in Fort Myers, or it happened in Immokalee, so that the people really feel the impact of the terror of the ghost story and the emotion of the ghost story. So you change it. Not a big change, right? Ain't nothing bad happening. Nothing like malicious behind it, right? It's just one of those little things that helps to move it forward. And of course, we did an entire episode, Ella and I, called The House Haunted, The Home Haunted. And of all the legends that I've uncovered, all the legends that I've tripped, pre-Florida, here in Florida, those are the ones that I didn't follow up on because they were dangerous to me. They seem to have an element of conjuring to them. But these are the stories that are being passed because these are the stories that are being spread on creepypasta. Right? That's our campfire. That's our sleepover. If you are unaware of what TikTok is, or if you think TikTok's just for middle-aged people to do funny dances that their kids are doing, or you think it's just to do funny things and like trade your voice with there's an evolution, and there's some actually really good filmmaking being done on TikTok. There's a lot of really interesting videos being produced for creepypasta. YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat. These are the modern way in which stories are being told. And so we have to look at how are the stories being told in those formats to see how things change. And so it makes sense, right? You don't have money. You're not a production company. You have the base terror, right? The base terror is what is the heart of a spooky moment that freaks you out, right? Modern horror, and at least this kind of produced horror, it's not based in, and then you can't sleep because you're constantly thinking about it in terms of like the deepness of it, right? You watch The Exorcist and you're freaked out not only by what you're seeing on camera, but the implication of it. You're being freaked out by the idea of the devil existing. If you are watching something like The Omen, you finish that movie and first of all, you're lucky you have your head still. You're like, okay, good. And you're like, I am never having children or adopting them, especially from Italians. But you are left with the idea of what if the Antichrist is on this earth? Because it's just realistic enough in the way that it's told that you're like, okay. And even if not, like there's still, even if you, the prophecy, I think it's called, um, with, uh, um, with, what's his name and the other guy. I'm doing horrible with names of movies and stuff tonight. Um, when you're watching that movie, it's pretty fantastic. It's a fantastical movie, and if you haven't seen it, it's a great movie. And I think it's really scary in that you take a step back afterwards and you say, I wonder if angels, what would it be like if angels and demons were really fighting for possession of the planet? The show Evil freaks me out. Love it, love it. This idea that that there is a force which initially is thought almost to be like, conspiracy theory, Big Brother corrupting people, and then by the end of it, you realize that it's something darker. Spoilers. Those are scary because they explore and exploit things that we're freaked out about that freak out. I guess you could almost say like the mammal brain, if you understand the idea of like the mammal brain versus the reptile brain. The idea that it triggers your intellect and it's not an automatic reaction. The jump scare is not new, um, but it seems to be what a lot of modern horror strives on. It was funny because Jill was looking at something. She's like, "Oh, now that thing is going to go like and run at the screen, and it did it right at time." And people know that, and you're expecting it, and you dig it when it happens, and you sigh and you go, ha ha ha, but you're not left with like a really scary taste in your mouth afterwards, right? Like it's there, it's done, you jumped, yeah, you look at each other. I didn't really jump, I wasn't scared, but there's no lasting effect on that. These newly produced horror clicks, I'm going to call them horror clicks because they're not full flicks most of the time, especially if you're working on something like TikTok. And TikTok, I've actually helped Ella make some of these, and I didn't even know what I was doing. She just said, do this, do that, turn the light off, open the door, and then afterwards I look at it, I'm like, wow, that was brilliant. I'm like, I wish I had this kind of technology when I was a kid. I totally would have probably not done anything with it. But there's a very easy way to capture the essence of that scariness, and it's this, right? If you don't have a lot of money, don't have a lot to work with, you simply turn off the lights, and then when you turn on the lights, something is there or not there, or someplace different, or something in the room has changed. And you can produce really good scares with this if you do it well. So one of the ones I was watching, it wasn't the one Vexed. I'm trying to remember what this one was called. I wanted to make a wish list on these, and unfortunately, they've now blocked Facebook. So I'm going to have to put out a playlist on YouTube before I publish this one. And the guy's watching the house, right? He's watching for someone house sitting. And he's reading the instructions, and it says, make sure you keep everything clean, and don't turn off the lights, is what it says. And he turns off the lights. And when he turns on the lights, there's a creepy girl that's there who has these long fingers and everything. And the twist on this one, which was what made it different, is for some reason all of the lights that are in the house were programmed on a clapper. So everything came on, everything came off. And so he and whatever this monster was were having this back and forth of clapping on the lights and clapping off the lights. And every time the paranormal figure, the supernatural figure, we'll call it a ghost, it was ghostly. And of course, that line's blurred in most of these. She would be a little bit closer. And eventually, she's too close. So very much like I said with the blinking of the camera of that movie. The difference on this one was that we saw all that he saw, right? So usually what you have is the lights go out, and then we as an audience see the figure, and then and then the game starts, and eventually they see it. You can make that really cheap. You can make that in less than an hour. I mean, these were really well made, so I don't want to diminish the good quality film work that these people did. But you can make it cheaply, right? The reason why the Blair Witch came out and was shot the way it was shot was because it was really inexpensive to do it like that. And so you have a really good idea mixed with that, and you've got gold. The idea of the lights go out, lights go on, there's something there, you can do that with very little money and effort. And of course, every time the lights go out, you can just cut. So you can edit it really. Essentially what I'm saying is, because you can make these, everyone's making them. And it's moving the needle. It's moving the needle of what a ghost story is. And it's moving the needle of horror. When you have something like the Blair Witch Project, I still have people to this day that are asking me if that's real, right? I'm like, it's not as if it just came out. It's 20 years ago. It's out there that it's not real. But things even like Paranormal Activity, what was it, The Fourth Kind, Slenderman videos. These are easy for people to duplicate. So the discussion I had got into about Slenderman was the reason why he became so popular was that you could make a fan film of Slenderman that was effective, right? And because you can make it on your phone, someone else can make it on their phone. And when you see it, you're like, oh my God, that looks like something I would shoot myself. I mean, I could totally, that's got to be real, right? People really do that. My son consumes those paranormal videos, and it's this guy's going, and shaking the phone, and he's like, see, Dad, it's demons. There's a believability because you're witnessing it, right? So when you see that, someone's filming something and then something dark goes by, you believe it. It's consumable, it's credible because you just saw it with your own eyes. And even, some of those, when you watch them, you yourself have to be, as an investigator or as someone who's just considers themselves like sophisticated, right? You sometimes have to ask, like, wait, what did that just? Oh, I see. They had that that little troll video where the guy is like bending in half, and it's a video camera. It's a security camera, and you're like, wait a minute, like, how is that something that you can I make that myself? Can I do it? But I'm seeing it, right? So even if it's unbelievable, there's a part of me that believes. So there has to be a trickle down impact to this, right? There has to be an impact between, legends work this way. First, there's the telling, then there's the retelling, and somewhere in there, there's the believing, right? At some point, when you hear it and when you retell it, and oftentimes we retell these stories before we even believe them ourselves. They just seem plausible enough, or there's a whole conversation going on. Will this happen? Will this happen? Well, I'm going down to North Carolina, and I'm going to go to a big place where there's Bigfoot and ghosts and witches. See what I did there, Margie? And you are now kind of like passing those stories on, whether you believe them or not. You know what I'm saying? Like, you heard of something in that park, you go off and you tell someone about it, and that person, being a step removed, is actually more likely to believe in it, and all of a sudden things develop. So we have horror, right? Horror is impacted by what we're scared of. What we're scared of is molded by the stories we tell and the stories we hear, which then impacts horror, which then gives it back to us so that we're scared of it again, which we then spread. So the thing that I was looking for was the jump. And Rita, to answer your question, she asks, is the tall man the same as Slender Man? I think that they're variations of the same kind of beast. I think that Slender Man is a very specific pocket kind of, and you can track the creation of actually Slender Man. But I think, and not even in a tulpa kind of way or a thought form kind of way, I think it taps into a paranormal phenomenon that's been occurring for as long as time exists. And the tall man is an extension of that. I was waiting for the jump. I was waiting to hear when this they come closer and closer idea was going to jump the rails into the real world. When it was going to attach itself to an already established legend, and that legend was going to shift and shift our understanding of it based on essentially what is cheap filmmaking. And it happened this weekend. Maybe 2 months ago now. Although I think the show I did on it was later, but I published the final things. I was finally able to get there a while ago. Yeah, it's probably about a year since I did the show. But it is on Jeepers Creepers. And Jeepers Creepers is, first of all, some of the background is based on a real story. And you can go back and listen to that episode in the archives. It's based on an incident, a real incident of a couple seeing a man disposing of a body. But there is also it was filmed in Florida. And the famous kind of stretch of road that they seem to be on, that they're eventually, the truck starts to follow them, is a real road in Florida that is in Dunedin, Florida. It's informally called Tiger Trail Road because the tigers is the name of the mascot of the high school that's right there. So if you were to keep going on that road, and I've been on that road, I went on that road a few weeks ago. If you continue on that road, you would come to the high school. And then the church is somewhat nearby. The church where they find the body is somewhat nearby, and that whole stretch of road is said to be haunted. I was actually able to, the church, I believe it's St. John's, is now burnt down. And I'll put the link to that episode and the article about it in the show notes. The church is gone. It was burnt down because essentially people were going there and partying and writing satanic things on the wall, and all this stuff kind of related to Jeepers Creepers. And another haunting nearby is actually now like it's said to be like that place, another church. I'm not going to get too much into that part of the story. You can go back and you can listen to that. But essentially, this stretch of road is said to be haunted by, and here we go, wait for it. It's said to be haunted not only by black-eyed kids, which we've never really done a show on black-eyed kids. I think we touched upon it a little bit. And also a hat man, like we talked about last week. So that really tall man who seems to be in a cloak and wearing a hat that's seen all around the Ocala forest, which essentially looks like Jeepers Creepers if you've ever seen the movie. Although I think those sightings predate that movie. Not in this location, just in general. And so there are these horrific stories from that road, right? That if you see these kids, they'll try to get into your car. People have gotten into accidents having to do with it. These teenagers have, one of them, once it was described as these teenagers who looked like they had no souls, and then their kids were there. And all of these really, really horrific paranormal things that happen on this stretch of road that also happened to be where Jeepers Creepers was filmed. And of course, you can debate yourself, which is a theory I kind of put forward, that there's, maybe not a curse, but there's a little bit of a taint to that stretch of road because of the movie, because of the total sketchiness of the filmmaker, and some things that were going on, that there is something off about that road. You go on that road, like we often talk about tripping on legends. You need to go to a location to fully get why a legend exists there. It is a creepy, creepy stretch of road, and I did it during the day. And one of the things that is most odd, is that as you go down this road, on the side, once it's this total stretch of nothingness, right? And it actually curves more than most Florida roads. And then you get to the location. I couldn't find the tree, the infamous tree that's like in the shot. But you go on the road, and then right before you get to the school, and for a ways afterwards, there are all these like derelict houses and burnt out places, and it looks like at any moment like something monstrous can come out and attack you. So it has also that should be haunted kind of feel. And people have been reporting this. Sometimes Backpacker Verse, seems to take a place that should be haunted and kind of amps it up. And I'm not always sure that I believe in what they write there, but I do believe that people talk about it. Jeremy, one of the things that's dramatically different between Tiger Trail and Copacut Road is Tiger Trail has nothing. Like Copacut Road is nothing, but it's a derelict road in the middle of a forest. This is literally flat land with like a tree and then a tree and then a farmhouse way off in the distance. But other than that, it is like just completely flat, and there's nothing, right? And of course there is, right? There are farms and stuff. But if it's like just driving through a desert, you know what I'm saying? A desert of green, mind you, but a desert. And I had heard one story, like one variation of the legend, which talks about, much like the red-headed hitchhiker of Route 44, much like Copacut Road, Jeremy, much like Julia in Lady Lake, the idea that if you turn off your lights, the figure will appear when you turn them back on. So you turn off your lights, you turn them back on, and the monster, the ghost, the whatever these things are, is now in your headlights, right? And that's a fairly common urban legend, right? Like that's a fairly common element of ghost stories, of folklore, ghostly folklore. Like I said, it's been, even though I have not ever heard of one person it's successfully happening to, people have been attaching that to the red-headed hitchhiker legend for 15 years, 20 years, and yet you can't find any actual reference to anyone who's done that and been successful. And if you have been, feel free to, call me up and call me an idiot. But I got an email this weekend that took it one step further. And the first thing I should say about this person is that they were 23 years old, right? I always ask the age of people. And I asked when they heard the legend, and he had said, oh, I just recently heard it. And because I heard it, then I looked for it, and I found your site, and I wanted to tell you that you forgot something, which I'm a huge fan of people emailing me or messaging me, telling me that I'm an idiot, telling me that I missed something. That's how folklore evolves, right? Is people making these corrections. But young, right? And I guess I'm really old. I'm the grandfather that needs to get off his rocker, I guess. But he says to me, by says I mean writes to me, that when you stop on Tiger Trail, and he was very specific that you need to go, this was great, you need to go 0.3 miles. I'll say that out loud in case no one really heard that. There's your three, which is also very popular in these things, finding its way into folklore. You go exactly 0.3 miles past the school and you turn off your lights. And when you turn them back on, and here was the variation, the figure is seen far down the road. And you can clearly see what he described as a guy who looks like Jeepers Creepers. He said you then turn off the lights and you start to hear the kids giggling. You turn back on the lights and he's a little bit closer. You turn off the lights, the kids start giggling a little bit louder. You turn on the lights, he's a little bit closer. You turn off the lights, the kids are even louder now, and now they're either scratching or tapping on your car. You turn on the lights, and he's a little bit closer. You turn off the lights, and they start pounding. You get where I'm going with this. And the ultimate end game of this is that either he kills you, and he was very specific about this, that some people had died from doing this. Some people had gone to an insane asylum because they let it get too close. And other people said that you have to, that they just freaked out the first few times and took off, but that they reported. And I asked, well, where is this told? Like, did you do this yourself? Did you? And he's like, oh, no. My friend's brother did it. He said a whole bunch of his friends did it. So you have that friend of a friend factor to it too. It was like if I could have invented a paranormal, ghostly legend, urban legend situation, this was it, right? He was literally taking, he was going down the salad bar, right? He got a little bit of this and a little bit of this and an established story and a movie. So there's an actual like figure attached to it, and that, the clicking. And of course, he said to get away, what you had to do is you had to, so a car, like it goes click to automatic, off, click to always on, you know what I'm saying? Like you had to do it in reverse. So you had to go off to judge, to read it, to off to read it, to off to read it, right? But if you wanted to get rid of it and you could actually watch it go away from you, you do the opposite, right? So you go from on all the time to off, to on all the time to off, and he'll get further and further away, and the kids will get less and less and less, and everything will slowly be back to normal. And then and only when you can only when you can not see him anymore, that's when it's safe to go. But if you leave before then, it's the same kind of thing. Every time you turn off your lights, it's go. The adolescent element of horror has jumped the rail, kids, right? This is the moment, and I'm sure if you were doing this in wherever you are, if you were doing this in Boise, if you were doing this in San Bernardino, if you're doing this wherever you are, this kind of thing has got to be happening there. The folklore, the ghostly stories are being rewritten, and they don't need a fire pit to do it. They don't need a campfire to do it, right? It is evolving based on how you can make cheap and effective horror. That idea of the appear and disappear, and please, someone, if you can come up with a legend or a legend that flies in the face of that, right? If you can say, no, that I heard that story 40 years ago, feel free to correct me. Send it to spookytripping@gmail.com or spookytripping on Instagram, or facebook.com/trippingonlegends. I would love to hear and have it verified that this is something that's not new, because I feel it is. I feel it really is this avalanche of they come closer kind of horror that has now jumped the rails to actually ghost stories that have been around for a while. You know, on Tiger Trail, um, and I've been on. So the story with me and Tiger Trail is that twice, and obviously that's far away from me. That's like three. That's like I think 4 hours away from me. Twice I was there. Once when I was doing things up in Gainesville, and another time when I was just staying overnight near Central Florida. I tried to get to Tiger Trail, and both times within 10 miles of where it is, my GPS kicked out on me. I don't mean that like, oh, I lost a signal. I mean like it just literally like I couldn't even launch the app. Um, and I was finally able to get there when I went on my Ocala trip at the beginning of the summer during the day. And you look at it and you say, "Oh yeah, I can see this is that kind of place." But that story, if you ask some people, it actually predates even Jeepers Creepers. Um, the general consensus is that weird things happening on that road is post Jeepers Creepers. So we're talking about a 20-year-old legend. I've been studying that legend for about 3 years. 3 years I've been following references to it. In that time, I had never heard that variation of the story. I had never heard someone say that you have to turn off your lights and things get closer, and that there's a ritual to it. It reminded me, those of you guys who are in Massachusetts or New England, what I call the greatest forgotten folk urban legend, which is Spider Gates, where as you got closer to the center of the cemetery, more and more intense things happen until if you ever were to reach the eighth gate, you would be in hell, and you would never, your soul would never find, happiness again, and blah blah blah, that kind of good stuff. Um, this had the same kind of feel to it, that you go darker and darker into yourself, or darker and darker into the world, because you're inviting it, right? Because you are there, you're conjuring it, you're asking it to come see you, and so therefore every time you turn off the light, you're making the decision. And so you're allowing the monster to come. This is the first time I had heard that theme, that process, on a ghostly legend that's supposed to be true. Right? A lot of times you have, like I said, like some people will think one of those movies is real, but this was an actual ghost story that's out there. That's fairly popular. It's Jump the Rails, kids. How the 12-year-old girl is demanding her horror be, her spooky be, her ghost story be, is impacting literature. It's impacting movies. It's impacting creative processes. It's now impacting ghost stories. It's now impacting ghostly legends. And here's the interesting thing. Those stories will persist. I have no doubt whatsoever that when I put that in my book, because you know it's going in there, you know it's going making it to the book, right? And when it makes more appearances on the internet, 3 years from now, it's just going to be part of the narrative. Just the way it works, right? 5 years from now, technology is going to change. The palette of the consumer is going to change. The ability to make something even more sophisticated, right? Because everyone's going to get that. Everyone's going to now not be scared by the person who comes closer and closer and closer. And so what's going to happen is it's going to evolve, right? And that's going to be left behind, and no one's going to remember that there was a time that it was really popular to do that kind of scare, right? And to tell that kind of story. That stuff's going to go away, and all we're going to be left with is the ghost stories that are impacted by it, which is going to actually make them more effective. It's actually going to make them more believable, until 20 years from now, 30 years from now, when people like me are not working anymore, and you just have the story that's there, it's just going to be the truth. It's just going to be fact. And it's going to be something that um, people are going to maybe have a hard time tracing back to a 12-year-old girl on TikTok having her dad open the door and appear in it, and then appears in the mirror, and then appear in the, and the lights go out, and it's a little bit closer, and the lights go out, and I'm a little bit closer, and the lights go back on. And you know, like, this is simplicity, and almost in its simplicity lies why it's so popular and why it is so effective and why it's jumped the rails. So when people say that kids aren't spreading ghost stories anymore, we know it's not true, right? We know it's not. Or more importantly, because I think this was really Dave's question, is are they scared anymore? And the fact of the matter is that they are, because that's real to them, right? That's as real to them as whatever, you know, the kids don't believe in ghosts under the bed anymore. They believe in ghosts that are coming closer and closer. And you could tell, like, another part of the connective tissue is when we did that Home Haunted, so many of the stories that are in that book take on that life, right? Take on that you've got to draw him closer, or he will come closer, or he will jump from one mirror in the house to another mirror in the house. And it is not something we can control. You know why? Because we're too old to control it, right? It's going to evolve, and it's going to evolve on technology that we're not using, and then it's going to kind of take on a life of its own. So it's a really cool idea. It's one of those things that exactly, Margie was talking about that story that if you look in the rear view mirror, the person will be in the back seat. An extension of that is if you drive on these ghostly roads with 3 people, the ghost will appear in the 4th. And once again, that's something I think that my generation and the generation maybe after us spread, right? And so I wonder what, because these kids don't drive, I wonder what well, I guess the mirrors would take that, right? Like, even there was one of the stories that was in that book that Elle and I explored. And I'll put the link to the book actually in Amazon, because it's a really fun book that tells you how to do all these things. It was chairs, right? It was that you get in a chair because, you know, kids can't drive, right? But it was, you line up the chairs, and you go at 3:00, and then you move into a different chair, and you guys shift, and eventually you stay, close your eyes, and a ghost is in the 4th seat. So it's something that even that kind of evolves. I'm going to wind down now, mainly because I want you guys to, if you're not following me on Facebook especially, Facebook / Tripping on Legends, season is heating up, man. You wouldn't be able to tell it because it's like 98 degrees here. See how you said 98 degrees because they're from... it's really hot down here in Florida, but season is coming. And for the next 3 weeks... so that is like the 27th, the 3rd, and the 10th, I think it is. I'm going to be doing a virtual program on for the library system in Central Florida. I can't remember the exact name of it. Citrus County, maybe? Or Sun County? I can't remember. But I will be posting the event links so you can actually come in. So this Friday, and if you're listening on podcasts because you've subscribed to the podcast on all those different ways you can do it, if you are following straight, or you're just kind of listening to what we're doing here, I'll be posting those first week. I'm kind of excited about this one. The first week, the theme of the presentation is murders of, ghosts of murders past. So it's all these ghosts that have to do with murder and specifically crime and all that stuff. Next week, so the 3rd, I'm going to be doing a presentation on haunted love. And then the last one that I'm going to be doing is actually a presentation on curses. So all ghost stories that have to do with curses. So I'll be putting those links out. I've talked to the librarian. He said, the more people, the merrier. So you can feel free to go in and register for those shows and see them live. If not, I won't be posting myself, but I'll be posting, I guess, when they go on YouTube. I've got other events coming as well. Not as many as last year, but I've got some cool stuff coming on, as well as some radio spots promoting the book and all that kind of good stuff. So you're going to want to follow the social media. Like I said, the primary one is facebook.com/tripping on legends, but also posting that stuff on Twitter at Spooky Balzano, and of course on my Instagram, love my Instagram people, at Spooky Tripping. So make sure you're following those things. Make sure you are going to the website, trippingonlegends.com. And follow what we're doing. I'm trying to vary everything that I do, because I'm doing so many radio shows to promote the book, as well as these events, that you're probably going to hear a few stories that you haven't heard. And if not, of course, you can go to the archives and hear them. But there's going to be a lot of stories that I'm going to talk about in these events that are ones that I haven't really explored. I will not be posting videos of the presentation, but I will post links to the YouTube, because actually the libraries themselves are going to be posting it on their YouTube. So I'm not going to be getting the hits, but I'll be getting the hits because hopefully the people will start following Tripping on Legends. And I'm obviously going to promote as much stuff as I can, slip my name into the presentation as much as I possibly can. So it's a big time. I'm excited. I'm 3 weeks away from Ocala Forest being finished, and we can start talking about that don't take place in Central Florida. But until then, I'm Christopher Balzano, and here's hoping that all your trips are legends.